Everyone refused to touch the sick alien kid, until a single dad janitor picked him up. My baby now. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Galactic Conference Center on Nexus Station bustled with activity as representatives from over 200 species gathered for the annual diplomatic summit. Against the backdrop of gleaming technology and alien finery, Hank Davis quietly pushed his cleaning cart through the crowded corridors, just another invisible human service worker. Hank had been working as a janitor at the station for 3 years now, ever since Earth had joined the Galactic Coalition. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to support himself and his daughter Lucy back on Earth. At 42, with graying temples and calloused hands, Hank had long ago accepted his place in the universe, small, unremarkable, but necessary. Section 42 needs immediate sanitation, crackled his comm device. Priority Level 2. Hank sighed, adjusting his blue maintenance uniform. Priority Level 2 meant someone had made a mess, usually the result of one species' food being incompatible with another's digestive system. It was a common occurrence at these multi-species gatherings. Copy that, he replied, steering his cart toward the designated area. The conference center was a marvel of architectural design, constructed to accommodate beings from worlds with vastly different atmospheric requirements, gravitational preferences, and biological needs. Massive crystalline windows revealed the star-speckled void of space beyond, a constant reminder of humanity's relatively new place in the galactic community. As Hank approached Section 42, he noticed something unusual. A crowd had gathered, but instead of the normal mingling, beings of various species stood in a wide circle, their attention focused on something in the center. Their postures, those who had recognizable postures, suggested alarm. "Excuse me," Hank said, trying to maneuver his cart through the throng. Most aliens moved aside automatically at the sight of his maintenance uniform, a testament to the universal constant of service workers being simultaneously essential and invisible. When he finally broke through to the center, Hank stopped short. There, curled on the polished floor, lay a small alien child. The young Zalivan trembled visibly, its scaled skin displaying patches of alarming blue discoloration. Zalivans normally exhibited healthy green tones, and the blue patches indicated serious illness. A viscous fluid leaked from the child's breathing apertures, forming a small puddle on the floor, likely the mess Hank had been called to clean. "Has anyone called medical?" Hank asked, looking around at the gathered diplomats and officials. A tall, spindly artesian diplomat raised 3 of its appendages in a gesture of distress. "The child appears to be suffering from cerulean fever. It's highly contagious among carbon-based life forms. Medical has been notified, but they're currently responding to another emergency in the Orion wing." Hank knelt down to get a better look at the child. The young Zalivan's 4 eyes blinked weakly, focusing briefly on Hank before closing again in obvious pain. "Isn't anyone going to help?" Hank asked, looking around at the gathered aliens. An imposing Drakari representative, his crimson scales gleaming under the station lights, rumbled in his translator. "Cerulean fever is particularly dangerous for most species here. It would be unwise to make contact without proper medical protection." "The fever is indeed serious," added an ethereal Lamidian, her translucent form pulsing with concerned light patterns. "It causes multi-system failure in most species. If the child is not treated soon, the prognosis is poor." Hank looked back at the suffering child. He knew next to nothing about Zalivan physiology or cerulean fever, but he recognized pain and fear when he saw it. The child couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a 5-year-old human, small even by Zalivan standards. "Where are the parents?" Hank asked. "The guardian was taken ill yesterday," replied a nearby Vortian official. "They're in quarantine in the medical bay." This child was believed to be unaffected and was being monitored by the Zalivan delegation, but clearly, the symptoms were merely delayed. The young Zalivan suddenly convulsed, a pitiful keening sound emerging from its breathing apertures. The crowd backed away further, murmurs of concern mixing with fear of contagion. Hank thought of his own daughter Lucy, who had faced her own battles with illness. After her mother died of cancer 6 years ago, Hank had raised Lucy alone, holding her through fevers, cleaning up messes, spending sleepless nights by her bedside. The thought of her suffering alone, surrounded by strangers who wouldn't touch her, made his chest tighten. Without further hesitation, Hank removed his maintenance gloves and gently placed a hand on the young Zalivan's forehead. It was burning hot, even through the scales. "What are you doing?" gasped a nearby Taurian diplomat, mandibles clicking in alarm. "Human, you risk infection." Hank ignored the warning. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." The young Zalivan's eyes fluttered open at the touch, all four focusing on Hank with surprising clarity. A tiny webbed hand reached out tentatively and touched Hank's arm. The gathered crowd made various sounds and gestures of shock. No one had expected the human maintenance worker to directly touch the infected child. "Medical is still 10 minutes out," said the Artesian diplomat. "Human, your species' response to cerulean fever is unknown. You should withdraw immediately and undergo decontamination." Hank carefully slid his arms under the small alien child, lifting him from the puddle of fluid. The young Zalivan weighed no more than a human toddler, his scaled body hot against Hank's chest. 10 minutes is too long," Hank said simply. "Which way to medical?" The gathered aliens stared in disbelief. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and their behaviors often confused other species. This act of apparent self-sacrifice for an unrelated alien child was particularly baffling. East Corridor, then north at Junction 14, offered the Lamidian finally, her light patterns shifting to indicate directions. Hank nodded his thanks and began walking, holding the trembling alien child close. The young Zalivan's breathing had become labored, the blue discoloration spreading visibly across his scales. "You'll be all right," Hank murmured, picking up his pace. "I've got you." As he moved through the corridors, aliens scrambled to get out of his way, alarmed by the sight of the infected child. A security drone buzzed nearby, its mechanical voice announcing, "Potential biohazard detected. Please maintain distance." Hank ignored it, focusing instead on the small life in his arms. The child's 4 eyes remained fixed on Hank's face, as if drawing strength from the human's calm determination. "My name's Hank," he said conversationally, trying to keep the child's attention as they hurried toward medical. "I have a daughter named Lucy. She's a bit older than you, I think. She had pneumonia last winter. That's a human illness. She was scared too, but she got better. You will too." The young Zalivan made a soft clicking sound, one webbed hand clutching weakly at Hank's maintenance uniform. As they approached Junction 14, Hank nearly collided with a tall, elegantly attired Zalivan diplomat. The alien froze, all 4 eyes widening at the sight of the human carrying one of their young. Ambassador Teclan. Hank recognized the Zalivan representative from previous diplomatic gatherings he'd cleaned after. "Human," the ambassador's translator conveyed his shocked tone. "What are you doing with this child?" "He's sick. I'm taking him to medical," Hank replied simply, continuing to walk. "You can come along if you want." The Zalivan ambassador fell into step beside Hank, studying him with obvious confusion. "This child has cerulean fever. You risk your health by contact." Hank shrugged as best he could while carrying the child. Someone needed to help him. "But why you?" Ambassador Teclan asked. "You are not medical staff. You are not Zalivan. This is not your responsibility." Hank looked down at the suffering child in his arms, then back at the ambassador. He needed help. That's all the responsibility I needed. They reached the medical bay doors, which slid open automatically. Inside, medical staff in protective gear rushed forward, immediately recognizing the situation. "Cerulean fever, stage 2. Hank informed them, reluctantly allowing them to take the child from his arms. "He's been symptomatic for at least 20 minutes that I know of." A human doctor in protective gear looked at Hank with alarm. "You've been in direct contact? Without protection? We need to get you into quarantine immediately." As the medical team rushed the young Zalivan into treatment, Ambassador Teclin observed Hank with increasing fascination. You may have sacrificed your health for a child not of your species. The child might still die despite your efforts. Why would you take such a risk? Hank watched through a transparent barrier as the medical team worked on the small alien child. The young Zalivan's eyes searched the room until they found Hank, then seemed to relax slightly. Where I come from, Hank said quietly, we don't leave kids to suffer alone, no matter who they belong to. The ambassador's translator was silent for a moment, as if struggling to convey the concept properly. Finally, it spoke. Your behavior contradicts known survival imperatives. Most species prioritize self-preservation and care only for their genetic offspring or close tribal units. Hank shrugged. Then I guess humans are different. A medical technician approached them, holding a scanner. Sir, we need to check you for signs of infection and begin preventative treatment. Hank nodded and followed the technician, but the Zalivan ambassador called after him. Human, what is your designation? Hank Davis. I'm a maintenance technician. Section 4. Hank Davis. The ambassador repeated carefully. The Zalivan Confederation recognizes your actions. This will be reported to your superiors. Hank winced slightly. Just doing what needed doing, Ambassador. No need for reports. In the quarantine chamber, Hank submitted to scans and injections while watching through the window as the medical team worked frantically to stabilize the young Zalivan. The child seemed smaller and more vulnerable under the harsh medical lights. Will he make it? Hank asked the technician administering his treatment. It's too early to tell, the technician replied. Cerebellian fever is serious, but he reached medical care faster than he would have otherwise, thanks to you. That improves his chances significantly. Hank nodded, hoping it would be enough. The thought of the child suffering alone in that crowded hall still bothered him deeply. Hours later, Hank sat in the quarantine chamber, having been cleared of immediate infection risk, but held for observation. The station's chief medical officer, a stern Andorian with silver skin, entered the chamber. Mr. Davis, she said, consulting her datapad. Your actions today were unorthodox and against station biosafety protocols. Hank straightened in his chair. How's the kid? The medical officer's expression softened slightly. The young Zalivan is stabilized. The early intervention likely saved his life. We've identified the fever strain and administered appropriate treatment. Relief washed over Hank. That's good news. Indeed. However, I must address your violation of protocol. The door to the quarantine chamber slid open, interrupting the medical officer. Ambassador Teclin entered, followed by a delegation of Zalivans and, surprisingly, the station's human diplomatic representative. Dr. Narration. The ambassador addressed the medical officer. This meeting takes precedence over administrative reprimands. The doctor looked surprised but stepped aside with a respectful nod. Ambassador Teclin approached Hank, who rose uncertainly to his feet. The ambassador performed a formal gesture, touching his primary right hand to his forehead and then extending it toward Hank. Hank Davis of Earth, the ambassador's translator conveyed. The child you saved is named Keleth. He is the only offspring of Council Elder Varen, who lies ill but recovering in quarantine. Elder Varen's bloodline is ancient and highly respected among our people. The human diplomat, a polished woman in her 50s named Ambassador Chun, stepped forward. Mr. Davis, the Zalivan Confederation has formally requested to recognize your actions through their highest civilian honor. Hank blinked in surprise. That's really not necessary. I just did what anyone would do. Ambassador Teclin's translator conveyed what sounded like a laugh. That is precisely why it is necessary, Hank Davis. No one else did what you did. Many beings from many worlds stood by, calculating risks, following protocols, preserving themselves. Only you, a human maintenance worker, set aside personal safety to help a suffering child not of your species. The ambassador continued, our medical experts have reviewed the case. Without your intervention, Keleth would have progressed to stage 3 cerebellian fever before medical assistance arrived. The survival rate at that stage is less than 20%. Hank swallowed hard. I'm just glad he's going to be okay. The child's guardian, Elder Varen wishes to speak with you, Ambassador Tekland said, gesturing to a communication screen on the wall of the quarantine chamber. The screen flickered to life, revealing an elderly Zalivan, his scales faded with age but his 4 eyes bright and alert. Though clearly still ill, the elder's posture conveyed dignity. Hank Davis of Earth, the elder's translated voice emerged from the speaker. I am told you carried my Keleth to safety when all others stood aside, that you touched him without fear when even his own kind hesitated. Hank shifted uncomfortably at the formal address. Anyone would have helped, Elder Varen. I just got there first. The elder made a gesture that Hank didn't recognize. That is not true, human, and we both know it. Many were there before you. Many saw, and none acted. Hank remained silent, unsure how to respond. I am told, Elder Varen continued, that when you took Keleth in your arms, you said something our translators struggled to interpret properly. Something about claiming him. Hank thought back to the moment, then understood. Oh, I might have said my baby now or something like that. It's something parents sometimes say on Earth when we pick up a child. It doesn't mean anything formal. It's just a way of saying I've got him. I'll take care of him. The elder's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Interesting. In our culture, such a claim would have significant meaning. It would constitute an offer of guardianship. Oh, Hank said, suddenly concerned he'd committed some cultural faux pas. I didn't mean to overstep. It was just a human expression. I understand, Elder Varen replied. But intentional or not, your actions embodied the essence of guardianship. You protected one who could not protect himself, at potential cost to yourself. This is the core of what we call Zealeth Varen, the sacred trust. The Zalivans in the room made a harmonious humming sound that Hank's translator didn't attempt to interpret. When may I see Keleth? Hank asked, realizing as he said it how attached he'd become to the child in their brief interaction. The medical team believes he will be well enough for visitors tomorrow, Elder Varen answered. He has asked for you several times. It seems you made quite an impression. Hank smiled. Kids are the same everywhere, I guess. They just want someone to be there when they're scared. After the communication ended and the delegation departed, leaving Hank alone in quarantine, he sent a message to his daughter Lucy back on Earth. He told her about his day, about Keleth, and about how sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be there for someone who needs you. Lucy's response came quickly. Dad, that's amazing. Did you really just adopt an alien? Hank laughed, typing back. No, sweetie. I just helped him when he needed it. Sometimes that's all it takes to make a difference. The next morning, Hank was cleared from quarantine with a clean bill of health. Humans, it turned out, possessed natural resistance to cerebellian fever, something that hadn't been known before since humans had never been exposed to the disease. Hank reported to his supervisor, expecting reprimand for abandoning his cleaning duties the previous day. Instead, the supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Martinez, simply nodded at him. Davis, she said, your shift today has been reassigned. You're to report to Medical Bay 4. Is everything okay? Hank asked, concerned. Martinez almost smiled. You've been requested. Apparently, you made quite an impression yesterday. In Medical Bay 4, Hank found Keleth sitting up in a bio bed, his scales already returning to their healthy green color. The young Zalivan's 4 eyes brightened visibly when he spotted Hank. Hank Davis, the child's translator, conveyed his excited chirps. You came. Hank smiled, approaching the bed. Of course I came. I wanted to see how you're doing. Keleth made a series of rapid clicking sounds that the translator interpreted as laughter. The doctors say I am recovering well because of you. They say you carried me here very fast. Well, you were pretty sick, Hank said, sitting in the chair beside the bed. How are you feeling now? Much better, Keleth replied. My respiratory passages no longer produce excess fluid, and my temperature has stabilized. Hank chuckled. That sounds like something the doctors told you to say. Keleth's head tilted in what Hank was beginning to recognize as a Zalivan expression of amusement. Yes, what they mean is I can breathe again, and I'm not so hot. They talked for nearly an hour. Keleth was curious about Earth, about Lucy, about why Hank had helped him when no one else would. Hank answered as best he could, surprised at how easy it was to communicate with the young alien once the initial awkwardness passed. On my world, Keleth said at one point, adults are very careful about touching young ones who aren't their own offspring. It is considered presumptuous. On Earth, Hank replied, we believe all children deserve care, not just our own. We have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It means everyone in a community has a responsibility toward the children. Keleth considered this. I like your Earth saying. Is that why you picked me up? Because of this village idea? Hank thought for a moment. Partly. But mostly it was because you reminded me of my daughter when she was sick, and I couldn't bear the thought of you being alone and afraid. I was afraid, Keleth admitted quietly. Until you came. Then I felt safe. The simple statement touched Hank deeply. Before he could respond, the door slid open and Elder Varen entered, supported by a medical assistant. Though still weakened by his own bout with the fever, the elder insisted on walking to Keleth's bedside. Grandfather, Keleth chirped happily. The elder placed a gentle hand on the child's head, then turned to Hank. Hank Davis. It is good to finally meet in person. Hank stood respectfully. Elder Varen, I'm glad to see you up and about. Thanks to excellent medical care, the elder replied. And to you, for ensuring my grandson received the same. A medical officer entered the room, checking readings on Keleth's biobed. The young one is recovering remarkably well. We'll be able to discharge him tomorrow, provided someone is available to monitor his condition. Elder Varen nodded. I am still recovering myself, but the Zalivan delegation will arrange appropriate care. The medical officer looked uncertain. With respect, Elder, the child's recovery would be better served by a quieter environment than the diplomatic quarters. The delegation suites are currently quite busy with conference activities. Hank spoke up without thinking. He could stay with me. All eyes in the room turned to him. I mean, Hank continued, slightly embarrassed by his impulsiveness. I have quarters here on the station. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet. I could look after him until Elder Varen is fully recovered. Elder Varen studied Hank with all four eyes. You would do this? Take responsibility for a child not of your species. Hank nodded. If it would help, yes. The elder made a gesture that Hank now recognized as thoughtful consideration. Such an arrangement would be unusual, but perhaps beneficial. Keleth seems comfortable with you, and the medical staff believe humans resistant to any lingering contagion. Please, grandfather? Keleth asked eagerly. Hank says he has picture books from Earth, and he promised to tell me about oceans. Elder Varen's expression softened. You have already formed a bond, I see. He turned to Hank. Very well. If the medical staff approve, Keleth may stay with you until I am fully recovered. And so it was arranged. Hank's small station quarters were modified to accommodate Zalivan physiological needs, a humidifier for their naturally drier skin, adjustments to the lighting to accommodate their four-eyed vision, and a supply of appropriate nutrition. That evening, as Hank helped Keleth settle into the small spare room that normally served as Hank's office, the young Zalivan asked, Hank Davis, did you mean what you said when you picked me up? What did I say? Hank asked, adjusting the humidifier settings. The humans who witnessed told my grandfather. You said my baby now. Did you mean that? Hank paused, choosing his words carefully. In human culture, it's just something we sometimes say when we pick up a child who needs comfort. It means, I'll take care of you right now. I didn't mean to claim you or anything formal like that. Keleth's four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign Hank had learned indicated processing of new information. But you are caring for me now, just as you said you would. I suppose I am, Hank smiled. In Zalivan culture, Keleth said solemnly, actions matter more than words. You acted as guardian, therefore you are guardian. Hank sat on the edge of Keleth's bed. I'm honored that you think so, but your grandfather is your real guardian. I'm just helping out for a little while. Keleth made the clicking sound that translated as laughter. Humans are strange. You do guardian things, but don't want guardian title. He paused, then added more seriously. Thank you for not being afraid to touch me when I was sick. Hank gently patted the child's scaled shoulder. You're welcome, buddy. Get some rest now, okay? As Keleth settled down to sleep, Hank sent another message to Lucy, updating her on the situation. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Dad, you have to bring him to meet me when you come home next month. I've always wanted a little brother, even an alien one." Hank smiled at his daughter's typical exuberance. He hadn't quite thought through all the implications of his impulsive offer to care for Kelleth, but he didn't regret it. The young Zalivan had awakened something in him, a reminder of the simple human compassion that had guided him throughout his life. Little did Hank know that his simple act of kindness was already creating ripples throughout the station and beyond. News of the human janitor who had risked infection to save an alien child was spreading rapidly through diplomatic channels. In a galactic community often characterized by careful calculation and strategic allegiance, the story of uncomplicated compassion was both confusing and compelling to many species. In his small station quarters, however, Hank Davis was concerned with simpler matters, making sure his young charge took his medicine, ate properly, and felt safe in an unfamiliar environment. These, after all, were the universal constants of caring for a child, no matter the species. Over the following days, Hank settled into a routine that would have seemed impossible just a week earlier. Each morning, he would help Kelleth with his medication, prepare breakfast suitable for Zalivan physiology, and then head to his maintenance shift, leaving the young alien in the care of a medical assistant during work hours. In the evenings, they would eat together, with Hank telling stories about Earth and Lucy, while Kelleth shared tales of his homeworld, Zaliva Prime. Despite the vast differences in their biology and culture, Hank was struck by how similar children were across species, curious, adaptable, and in need of security and affection. "Why do humans have only two eyes?" Kelleth asked one evening as they shared dinner in Hank's quarters. Hank chuckled. "I could ask why Zalivans need four." Kelleth's scales rippled in what Hank had learned was their equivalent of a thoughtful expression. "Four eyes give us greater peripheral vision and depth perception. It helped our ancestors spot predators in the dense forests of our homeworld." "That makes sense," Hank nodded. "Humans evolved on open plains, where distance vision was more important than seeing all around us." "But it limits your awareness," Kelleth observed, his four eyes blinking in sequence. "How do you know what's behind you?" "We turn our heads," Hank demonstrated with a smile. "Or we rely on others to watch our backs." Kelleth considered this. "So humans need each other more?" "Maybe," Hank replied. "We're social creatures. We've always survived by working together." "Is that why you helped me?" "Because humans need to help each other?" Hank set down his fork, giving the question serious consideration. "Partly. Humans tend to look out for each other, especially for children. But it wasn't really a logical decision. When I saw you suffering, I just couldn't walk away. It was instinct. Grandfather says instincts are the wisdom of our ancestors speaking through our bodies," Kelleth said solemnly. Hank smiled. "Your grandfather sounds wise." "He is," Kelleth agreed. "But he was surprised by what you did. He says humans are unpredictable." "We get that a lot," Hank laughed. Later that night, after Kelleth had gone to sleep, Hank received a message from Ambassador Chun, the human diplomatic representative. She requested a meeting the following morning, specifying that it was a matter of diplomatic significance. Hank frowned at the message. He was just a maintenance worker, far removed from diplomatic circles. What could possibly require his attention at that level? The next morning, after arranging for Kelleth's care, Hank made his way to the diplomatic offices, feeling distinctly out of place in his blue maintenance uniform among the formally attired officials and representatives. Ambassador Chen greeted him warmly. "Mr. Davis, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Her office overlooked the station's central atrium, offering a spectacular view of the diverse aliens going about their business below. Various flags and emblems from Earth nations decorated the walls, alongside artifacts from human history and culture. "Am I in trouble, Ambassador?" Hank asked directly, perching uncomfortably on the edge of an elegant chair. Chen smiled. "Quite the opposite, Mr. Davis. Your actions regarding the Zalivan child have created quite a stir in diplomatic circles." Hank shifted awkwardly. I was just doing what seemed right. And therein lies the fascination, Chun replied, leaning forward. What seemed like a simple, instinctive action to you has become a topic of significant discussion among various delegations. She activated a holographic display on her desk. In the past 5 days, 17 different species have formally requested information about human childcare practices, social structures, and ethical frameworks. The Zalivan Confederation has proposed a cultural exchange program focused specifically on family structures and community care models. Hank blinked in surprise. All because I helped one sick kid. Ambassador Chin's expression turned serious. Mr. Davis, you must understand the context. Many species in the coalition evolved from strict hierarchical structures where care was reserved exclusively for genetic offspring or close clan members. The concept of extending protective instincts to unrelated young, especially those of different species, is literally alien to them. But that's just basic decency, Hank protested. To us, yes, Chin nodded. But that's exactly the point. What humans consider basic decency is proving to be a relatively unusual trait in the galactic community. Your simple act of compassion has sparked genuine curiosity about human social dynamics. She continued, the Zalivan Confederation, in particular, has expressed interest in learning more. Elder Varen has requested that you attend a formal diplomatic function tonight. Me? Hank asked incredulously. I'm just a janitor. Chin smiled. Tonight, you're a cultural ambassador, Mr. Davis. I've already cleared it with your supervisor. You'll be representing humanity in a very real way. Hank ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. What am I supposed to say to a bunch of diplomats? Just be yourself, Chin advised. That's exactly what they're interested in, the authentic human perspective. The unfiltered Hank Davis who picked up a sick child because it was the right thing to do. That evening, feeling distinctly uncomfortable in borrowed formal attire, Hank stood in the grand reception hall of the Zalivan diplomatic section. The space was humid and bathed in the amber light that Zalivans found most comfortable, with decorative elements reminiscent of the dense forests of their homeworld. Elder Varen, looking much recovered, approached Hank with the formal, gliding movement that indicated respect in Zalivan culture. Hank Davis, the elder greeted him. You honor us with your presence. The honor is mine, Hank replied carefully, having been briefed on proper diplomatic responses. I'm grateful for the invitation, though I'm not sure what I can contribute. Elder Varen made a gesture that Hank had learned indicated amusement. Precisely what makes you valuable, human. You act without calculation of contribution. Before Hank could respond, a chime sounded, indicating the formal commencement of the gathering. Elder Varen guided Hank to a raised platform where representatives from various species had assembled. Esteemed colleagues, Elder Varen addressed the gathering, his translator conveying his words to the diverse audience. We gather tonight to honor an action that has prompted much reflection among our peoples. The elder turned to Hank. 6 days ago, this human, a maintenance worker with no diplomatic training or special status, acted in a way that has challenged many of our assumptions. When faced with a child, my grandchild, suffering from a potentially fatal and contagious illness, Hank Davis set aside personal safety and species distinction to provide immediate care. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries. For many of us, Elder Varen continued, such behavior appears irrational. It contradicts evolutionary imperatives of self-preservation and genetic prioritization. Yet for humans, it seems to be intuitive, an expected response rather than an exceptional one. The elder turned to address Hank directly. Tell us, Hank Davis, was your action considered extraordinary among humans? Put on the spot, Hank cleared his throat nervously. No, Elder Varen. Most humans would have done the same. Where I come from, we believe all children deserve protection and care, regardless of who they belong to. Even alien children, asked a Drakari representative, the same crimson-scaled diplomat who had warned Hank about the contagion. Hank nodded. Children are children, no matter what they look like or where they come from. But what of the risk to yourself? Inquired an Artesian diplomat. You had no knowledge of your species' resistance to cerulean fever. You risked your life for an unrelated being. Hank struggled to articulate what seemed so obvious to him. When someone needs help, especially a child, the risk doesn't really factor in. It's just what you do. Is this a cultural teaching? Asked another representative. A religious doctrine? It's both, and neither, Hank replied honestly. We have teachings and beliefs that reinforce it, sure. But it's also something deeper, a basic human instinct to protect the vulnerable, especially children. Elder Varen interjected. Our xenobiologists suggest this trait may relate to human evolutionary history. Unlike many species, human infants are born remarkably underdeveloped, requiring extensive communal care for survival. Hank hadn't considered that scientific angle, but it made sense. Maybe. We do have a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Throughout our history, humans have shared childcare responsibilities within communities. Fascinating, remarked the Lamidian representative, her translucent form pulsing with interested light patterns. A biological imperative evolved into a cultural value that extends beyond species boundaries. The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with representatives from various species asking Hank questions about human social structures, childcare practices, and ethical frameworks regarding the protection of the young. Hank answered as best he could, often surprised by how concepts he considered universal were apparently unique to human experience. As the formal part of the gathering concluded, Elder Varen guided Hank to a quieter area where refreshments were being served. Kelleth was waiting there, looking much recovered and dressed in formal Zalivan attire. Hank, the young Zalivan chirped happily, rushing forward. Did you see me? I was sitting with the junior delegation. Hank smiled. I saw you. You looked very official. I told them all about you, Kelleth said proudly. About how you make me eat green vegetables because they're good for me, just like Zalivan caretakers do. Elder Varen's translator conveyed what sounded like a chuckle. Indeed, my grandson has been quite detailed in his descriptions of human caregiving practices. He finds many similarities between our approaches, despite our biological differences. Kids are kids, Hank shrugged. Some things are universal. Perhaps more than we previously believed, Elder Varen observed thoughtfully. Hank Davis, there is something I wish to discuss with you. The elder led Hank to a private alcove, where they could speak without being overheard. My recovery progresses well, Elder Varen began. Soon, I will be able to resume full guardianship of Kelleth. I'm glad to hear it, Hank replied sincerely. He misses you, though he's trying to be brave about it. He speaks highly of his time in your care, the elder said. This leads me to a proposal of significant cultural importance. Hank listened attentively as Elder Varen explained. In Zalivan tradition, when a child receives life-saving care from one not of their bloodline, a special bond is recognized, what we call Calith Varen, or life debt guardianship. It is an ancient practice, rarely invoked in modern times, and never before with a non-Zalivan. The elder continued, such a bond acknowledges that the child now exists because of the guardian's intervention. It creates a formal, lifelong connection, not replacing the primary family bond, but existing alongside it as a recognized relationship. Hank took a moment to process this. You're suggesting some kind of official relationship between me and Kelleth? If you are willing, Elder Varen nodded. It would be unprecedented between species, but the Zalivan High Council has reviewed the case and agrees that the traditional criteria have been met. You saved Kelleth's life at potential risk to your own, provided care during his recovery, and formed a meaningful bond. Hank considered the proposal carefully. What would this mean, practically speaking? It would grant you certain rights and responsibilities regarding Kelleth's well-being, Elder Varen explained. You would be consulted on matters affecting his future, invited to significant life events, and recognized as having a voice in his upbringing, though primary guardianship would remain with me, of course. The elder's four eyes focused intently on Hank. More importantly, it would formally acknowledge what already exists, the bond between you. It would give Kelleth the security of knowing that connection is valued and permanent, not merely circumstantial. Hank thought of his own daughter, Lucy, and how she had bonded with certain teachers and family friends who had played significant roles in her life, especially after her mother's death. Those relationships had been valuable to her development and sense of security. "I'm honored by the offer," Hank said sincerely, "but I need to consider how this might affect my own daughter. And I'd want to make sure Kelleth understands what it means." Elder Varen made a gesture of approval. "Thoughtful consideration is appropriate for such a significant decision. Speak with your daughter. We will await your response." That night, Hank called Lucy via the station's long-range communication system. Her face lit up the screen, her 11-year-old features animated with excitement. "Dad, how's Kelleth? Did you show him the pictures I sent? Does he really have 4 eyes? Can he see in the dark?" Hank laughed at her enthusiasm. "Slow down, Luce. Yes, I showed him your pictures. He thinks your science project looks really cool. And yes, he has 4 eyes, but he can't see in the dark any better than we can." Lucy's expression turned serious. "Dad, is he really okay now? You said he was really sick." "He's much better," Hank assured her. "Almost completely recovered." "Good." Lucy nodded firmly. "It would have been sad if you couldn't save him." Hank took a deep breath. "Actually, that's something I wanted to talk to you about. Kelleth's grandfather has suggested something called a life debt guardianship. It's as alive in tradition when someone saves a child's life." He carefully explained the concept, watching his daughter's reaction closely. Lucy listened attentively, then asked, "So it would be like you're his godfather or something? But for aliens?" "Something like that," Hank nodded. "It would mean Kelleth would be a part of our lives long term. I'd have responsibilities toward him, and he'd have a connection to our family." "Like an alien brother?" Lucy asked, her eyes widening. "Not exactly. He'd still live with his grandfather, and his primary family wouldn't change. But there would be a recognized bond." Lucy considered this for a moment, then declared with the straightforward certainty of childhood, "I think you should do it, Dad. You always said family isn't just about blood. It's about who you care about and who cares about you." Hank smiled, touched by her response. "You're right, Luce. I did say that. Besides," she added pragmatically, "how many kids get to have an alien as part of their family? My friends will be so jealous." The next day, Hank informed Elder Varen of his decision to accept the Caliph-Varen bond. The Elder arranged for the formal ceremony to take place before his departure from the station, scheduled for the following week. As news of the unprecedented cross-species guardianship spread through diplomatic channels, interest in human social structures and care practices grew even more pronounced. Ambassador Chun informed Hank that requests for cultural exchange programs had doubled, with particular focus on human approaches to community care and protection of the vulnerable. "You've accidentally become humanity's most effective diplomat, Mr. Davis," she told him with a smile, "by simply being human." The day of the ceremony arrived. The Zalivan Diplomatic Hall had been prepared according to traditional customs, with symbolic elements representing the forests of their homeworld and the interconnected nature of their community structure. Hank, dressed in formal attire provided by the Human Diplomatic Corps, stood beside Elder Varen on a raised platform. Kelleth, wearing ceremonial Zalivan garments, waited nearby, his 4 eyes bright with excitement. Representatives from various species had gathered to witness the unprecedented event, including the station's highest-ranking officials and diplomats from 23 worlds. Elder Varen began the ceremony with traditional Zalivan invocations, the translator conveying the poetic language of ancient bonds and sacred responsibilities. Then, he turned to address the gathering directly. "Today, we formalize what began as an instinctive act of compassion." The elder's translated voice resonated through the hall. "When Hank Davis lifted my grandson from the floor of the conference center, he did more than transport an ill child to medical care. He demonstrated a principle that transcends species boundaries, that the vulnerable deserve protection, regardless of origin." The elder turned to Hank. "Human tradition places great emphasis on verbal oaths. Would you share words from your culture that express the commitment of guardianship?" Hank hadn't prepared for this request, but found himself thinking of the simple promise he had made to himself when Lucy was born. He looked at Keleth and spoke from the heart. Where I come from, we promise our children this. I will be there when you need me. I will listen when you speak. I will celebrate your joys and comfort your sorrows. I will respect who you are and who you will become. And I will always, always care about what happens to you. The translator conveyed his words in the melodic clicks and trills of the Zalivan language. Keleth's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. A sign Hank had learned indicated deep emotion. Elder Varen then produced a small ceremonial object, a crystal pendant carved with intricate patterns. This is the Caliph Varen token, the elder explained. Traditionally, it is divided between guardian and child, each keeping half as a symbol of their connection. With practiced precision, the elder separated the crystal along a nearly invisible seam, creating 2 halves that fit perfectly together. He handed one half to Hank and the other to Keleth. These halves, like your lives, remain connected even when separate, Elder Varen intoned formally. The bond acknowledged here today does not replace family, but expands it beyond traditional boundaries. Keleth stepped forward, holding his half of the crystal. Following instructions he had clearly been given, he spoke in carefully practiced English. I accept your guardianship, Hank Davis of Earth. Your care gave me life. Your kindness gave me strength. Hank felt a lump in his throat as he responded with the Zalivan phrase he had been taught. Caliph Varen, Keleth of Zaliva. Your life enriches mine. Your future concerns me as my own. Elder Varen completed the ceremony with traditional blessings, and the gathered diplomats responded with their species' various forms of acknowledgement and approval. As the formal proceedings concluded, Keleth rushed to Hank's side. Is it real now? Are you officially my Caliph Varen? Hank nodded, smiling. It's official, though I'm not sure I pronounced everything correctly. Your pronunciation was acceptable, Elder Varen assured him, approaching with a dignified glide. More importantly, your intent was clear and sincere. The elder's 4 eyes studied Hank thoughtfully. When you carried Keleth to medical care, you used a human expression, my baby now. At the time, I did not fully appreciate its significance. Now I understand it reflected a profound truth about your species, your capacity to extend protection and care beyond conventional boundaries. Hank shrugged slightly. It's just what humans do. No, Elder Varen corrected gently. Not all species do this. Many, including my own until quite recently, restrict such care to genetic offspring or close clan members. Your species' willingness to extend protection to unrelated young, even those of different species, is remarkable. The gathering transitioned to a more informal reception, where representatives from various worlds approached Hank with questions and observations about human social structures and care practices. Many expressed interest in further cultural exchanges focused specifically on human approaches to community support and protection of the vulnerable. Later, as the reception wound down, Hank found a quiet moment with Keleth. I'm returning to Earth next month, he told the young Zalivan. But this doesn't end our connection. We'll stay in touch through communications, and maybe you can visit someday. Lucy is very excited to meet you. Keleth's scales rippled with emotion. Will I see you again before you leave the station? Of course, Hank assured him. Elder Varen and I have already arranged for you to spend time with me until my departure, and we'll talk regularly after that. I will miss you, Keleth admitted, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Hank gently touched the young Zalivan's shoulder. I'll miss you too, buddy. But that's the thing about connections like this. Distance doesn't break them. Elder Varen approached, observing their interaction with evident approval. The Zalivan High Council has formally recognized this Caliph Varen bond, he informed Hank. More significantly, they have proposed using it as a model for a broader initiative. What kind of initiative? Hank asked. A cross-species caregiving exchange, the elder explained. Not unlike your human concept of exchange students, but focused on understanding different approaches to nurturing the young. The Council believes there is much to learn from human practices in this regard. Ambassador Chen joined them, nodding in agreement. The Human Diplomatic Corps is already discussing the framework for such a program. Your experience with Keleth has opened doors that formal diplomacy couldn't, Mr. Davis. Hank looked between them, somewhat overwhelmed by the implications. All I did was help a sick kid. I never expected it to turn into all this. Sometimes, Elder Varen observed, the most profound changes begin with the simplest actions. In the weeks that followed, Hank continued his regular maintenance duties at the station while spending his free time with Keleth. They explored the station's public areas, shared meals, and exchanged stories about their respective worlds and cultures. Through these interactions, Keleth's understanding of humans deepened, as did Hank's appreciation for Zalivan perspectives. The day before Hank's scheduled return to Earth, he received an unexpected message from Martinez, his supervisor. "Davis," she said when he reported to her office, "I've been instructed to offer you a choice regarding your next assignment." Hank listened with surprise as Martinez explained that, due to the diplomatic significance of his connection with the Zalivans, he was being offered a position as a cultural liaison for the Human-Zalivan exchange program. The role would still be based primarily on Earth, allowing him to be with Lucy, but would include occasional travel to the station and eventually to Zaliva Prime itself. "They want me as a diplomat?" Hank asked incredulously. "I'm a maintenance technician." Martinez almost smiled. "Apparently, they want precisely that, someone who acts from authentic human instinct rather than diplomatic calculation. The role would include a significant pay increase and educational opportunities for your daughter." Hank considered the offer carefully. It would mean a major change from the predictable routine he'd established since joining the station staff. But it would also provide better opportunities for Lucy and allow him to maintain his connection with Keleth more effectively. "I'll do it," he decided. "For the kids." Martinez nodded, unsurprised. "That's what I told them you'd say." The following day, as Hank prepared to board the transport vessel that would return him to Earth, he found Elder Varen and Keleth waiting at the departure bay. "We came to say goodbye," Keleth explained, his scales displaying the blue-green pattern that Hank had learned indicated mixed emotions. Hank knelt to eye level with the young Zalivan. "This isn't goodbye, buddy. It's just see you later. Remember, we have the Caliph-Varen bond now. That doesn't end with distance." Keleth reached into a pouch in his formal garment and produced a small object, a handcrafted model of Earth fashioned from materials available on the station. "I made this for you, so you can show Lucy what I learned about your world." Hank accepted the gift, genuinely touched. "It's perfect. I'll put it right next to her bed so she can see it every day until she meets you in person." Elder Varen stepped forward, performing the formal gesture of respect. "Hank Davis of Earth, you came to our attention through a single act of compassion. You remain in our regard through the quality of your character. The bond you have formed with my grandson will endure, as will the lessons your humanity has taught us." Hank stood, returning the gesture as best he could. "Thank you for recognizing something I did instinctively and giving it formal meaning. The Caliph-Varen bond matters to me too." The departure chimes sounded, indicating final boarding for the Earth transport. "I have to go," Hank said, reluctant despite his eagerness to return to Lucy. Keleth stepped forward and, in a gesture that blended human and Zalivan customs, wrapped his arms around Hank in an embrace while touching his forehead to Hank's in the traditional Zalivan manner. "Until we meet again, Caliph-Varen," the young Zalivan said solemnly. Hank returned the embrace gently. "Until then, kiddo, take care of your grandfather, and remember to eat your vegetables." As Hank boarded the transport vessel, finding his seat by the viewport, he could see Elder Varen and Keleth remaining in the observation area, watching as the final preparations for departure were completed. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Hank felt the slight shift as they disengaged from the station's docking mechanisms. Through the viewport, he watched as the massive structure of Nexus Station began to recede, the stars beyond growing more visible as the ship moved away. Keleth and Elder Varen remained visible in the observation area, the young Zalivan raising all four arms in the human gesture of waving goodbye that Hank had taught him. Hank waved back, though he knew they probably couldn't see him through the small viewport. As the station grew smaller in the distance, He reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion. He had arrived at Nexus Station 3 years ago as just another human maintenance worker, invisible, unremarkable, necessary, but unnoticed. He was returning to Earth now as something more, a cultural ambassador, a recognized Calith-Varen guardian, a living example of humanity's capacity for cross-species compassion. And it had all started because he couldn't bear to see a child suffering alone. As the transport ship accelerated toward Earth, Hank carefully packed Kelitha's handmade globe into his personal bag, nestling it securely between layers of clothing. He imagined Lucy's face when he showed it to her, her excitement at learning about her new connection to a young's enlivened halfway across the galaxy. "Attention passengers," the ship's announcement system intoned. "We have achieved standard travel velocity and are on course for Earth. Estimated arrival, 42 hours. You may now move freely about the cabin." Hank settled back in his seat, watching the stars streak past. He thought of the crystal half hanging around his neck, the matching piece with Kelith, and the unexpected bond that now stretched across the vastness of space. A bond formed not through formal diplomacy or strategic alliance, but through the simple human instinct to help a child in need. In diplomatic halls across the galaxy, discussions about human social structures and care practices continued, sparked by the story of a janitor who had picked up a sick alien child when no one else would. Species that had previously viewed humans as primitive or simplistic began to recognize the sophisticated social adaptations underlying their seemingly instinctive compassion. And on Nexus Station, a young Zalivan with 4 bright eyes proudly told anyone who would listen about his human Calith-Varen, who had said, "My baby now," and meant it in the way that mattered most. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.